Welcome to the Jack Rice Show. This is today's 830 WCCO. It's 210. Welcome to the program. This land is their land. Reports from a divided nation. You may recall this woman. You probably should. The name of her best-selling book, Nickel and Dimed, I should say, Barbara Ehrenreich. One of the things that she talked about was, and he talked about it then and she talks about it now, is this shift. The shift in where we are as a nation, but I think individually where we are. I looked at a recent study that found that the top 1% of Americans own 33.4% of the wealth. The top 20% own 84%. The bottom 80% of us share amongst ourselves 16% of all that we have. So when we talk about the need to defend this country, sometimes I think, should the bottom 80% do all the heavy lifting, or should it be the top 20, or maybe even the top 1? Well, at least that's one of the things I want to talk about with Barbara Ehrenreich, who joins me in studio. Barbara, thanks for coming in.
Oh, good to be with you again, Jack.
Yeah, it was nice to have you come back. Now, why did you go down this path? Because what I saw here is different than what I saw before. Before, you have written about stories about individuals. These are almost smaller snippets about various things that you talk about.
Essays, yeah. These are little essays and columns. And I do that all the time anyway. You know, I write these things. I don't just write books like Nickel and Dimed. I'm also responding to all the things that are going on. And this is a collection of those essays from pretty much the Bush years, at least the later Bush years.
I think about the most important issue to Americans right now. I mean, for some time, I saw it to be Iraq. We were talking about what this meant, and the entire country was obsessed upon it. And then slowly but surely, everybody was shifting over to the economy and what it meant. It's not just about $4 per gallon gasoline. It's more than that. And that seems to be the difference. And yet, when I watch both John McCain and Barack Obama, they seem to be struggling to come up with the answers that are gaining the traction that they want. Am I missing something?
I feel the same way. Well, I mean, John McCain has his answers, and that is to continue Bush's economic policies, preserving that and increasing the tax cuts for the wealthy. He doesn't seem to get it. Remember a few weeks ago when he said his feeling about people whose homes had been foreclosed was they should take a second job and not go on a vacation.
Well, that should do it, shouldn't it?
That should do it, right.
We had Steve Forbes in studio, not in studio, but on the phone with us yesterday, and what he said was, well, we have to have those tax cuts for those people because those are the ones who create the jobs. And I thought, well, wait a second. If I go back to those statistics I started with, those statistics that said the people at the top of the proverbial heap are the ones who are getting all of the gain and apparently keeping it, the idea of giving them more tax cuts so they could, quote unquote, trickle down to the rest of us, it doesn't seem like much trickling is being done, and if there is, it's not the good kind.
No. And we've been hearing this since the Reagan years, trickle down. Just wait. Keep giving the rich more and more money. Keep shoveling it uphill. And eventually, they'll notice all this money that's coming their way. And maybe they'll invest in something that leads to better jobs for us. It hasn't worked in over 20 years. So
then why is it that it has gained so much traction? I mean, when I talk to Republicans, when I talk to conservatives, they hold out this economic policy of Ronald Reagan like it's some sort of set of tablets from on high. I mean, they really do.
Well, everybody else seems to agree that it hasn't worked. I mean, not even talking about the current crisis. You know, wind back the clock, pretend it's a year ago, before the current crisis began. And you would see, even at that time, wages were stagnant or falling for ordinary people, even though we were experiencing economic growth, increases in productivity, and declines in unemployment. So that even in the optimal circumstances for things to get better for people, you know, incomes were held down. And the way there's so many ways they do that, preventing people from organizing into unions, little tricks like the kind that Circuit City pulled a year ago where they fire 3,400 people because they're making too much money, you know, above $10 an hour, and tell them that they can come back and reapply for their old jobs, but at the minimum wage. This is how you hold people down, and they've been doing that for so long.
We just saw the Attorney General right here in Minnesota going after Walmart, because Walmart, and they apparently have done this in other parts of the country as well, where they would make people go on break and then come back and go to work. They would do all sorts of things like this, and apparently this is a common practice. This cost them, was it $52 million? I suspect they made substantially more than that for the ability to have all those workers.
That's called wage theft. At Walmart, the way it would happen is, and I remember I worked at Walmart when I was working on nickel and dime.
That's right, I remember that. I'm sorry to bring that up to you.
A supervisor might come over and say, go punch out because I've got a lot of work for you to do now. In other words, the paid part of your day is over. Now you're going to start volunteering. Or it's just in so many jobs.
Very thoughtful.
Yeah, so many jobs where you're told to come in 15 minutes early just to get your desk all set up. It goes on all the time, but it's a way of holding wages down. Now, of course, what the employers and the people who are doing these things don't seem to think about is that if wages are held down enough, and salaries for the white-collar people, at some point people can't buy stuff. And this is an economy that depends 70% on consumer spending.
But do we depend that much about that? I mean, I realize that at some point that this will fail. But you know what? People don't care about someday. They care about this quarter. They care about next quarter. They don't care about 5 years from now or 10 years from now. Why should they? Their job is to make as much as they possibly can right now.
Yeah, no, that's the thinking that has dominated American corporations, since the 90s or throughout the 90s, is the next term's quarterly profit. What will that do to share prices? That's all we care about. They're not looking at the fact, that if you downsize, you lay off all kinds of people, you hold wages down, you're not going to have consumers for whatever it is you're making or supplying.
I think about the amounts of money and the success that has been gained in the country sometimes. I talk about how well the economy has done, and I think about how flat our salaries have been in the middle class, a lot. And I have to keep coming back to this number that talks about how the amount of profits, the amount that's owned by a smaller number continues to increase. So if we look at how well the economy is, big picture, in terms of all the money that's made, it sounds like we're all doing much better.
Oh yeah, the average is fine.
Right.
The median is not so good.
That's right.
Because,
so now all of a sudden we need to realize that when we were in school we never really understood the why we should care about average and medium. And now all of a sudden you realize, gosh, maybe we should.
They're really out of line because it's such a skewed distribution. Let me just throw in one other statistic, which
just to
I
depress
thought
me.
Yeah, no, it's like the ones you gave, but it just really struck me. And that is that the richest 1% of Americans actually has more wealth than the bottom 90% of Americans. Another way, another number to like the ones you were giving.
Gee, thanks a lot for that one. Barbara, stay with me. When we come back, let's talk more about this. But let's broaden this beyond the economy. There's a whole series of things that are going on. It's a huge debate right now, and there really is a question on where the country is going. As I recall from one recent poll, more than 80% of Americans believe that we're going the wrong direction. So the obvious question is, what direction should we be going in? Barbara Ehrenreich is my guest. The name of the book, This Land is Their Land, reports from the divided nation, a divided nation. Stay with us, 19 minutes after 2. This is today's 830 WCCO.